He's a mayor on the part of Santiago. He been able to construct a lot of things, a popular pharmacy, popular, a lot of things which showing in real terms the alternative to neoliberalism. Yeah, so he's #1 on the polls at the moment for president, 2 years time. He's saying that for the left in everywhere, everybody needs to understand that we need to make our own way, and we are making our own way. It's slightly unorthodox, slightly not following the true kind of meaning of, if you look at Marxism, how you develop struggle. But we are genuine. It's a Latin American, it's a Chilean thing done under the conditions, under new conditions, which you don't have in Europe, you don't have anywhere. It happened in Chile. We are trying to put together something, and we have been successful. And we're quite successful, actually. That's why I'm talking to you here. I'm trying to pass on our kind of optimism to the left elsewhere. I mean, because we are in problems. We are in problems in Britain with Jeremy being attacked. No? And in general, everywhere, we just come back from very bad condition in Bolivia. We might say Venezuela and Nicaragua, if there is a change in America. We might go back in Brazil. We are kind of going back in Argentina. And now Chile. Chile is the true kind of thing that is going to make big waves in the future. But we are 2 years away of that. I think I'm positive, but we need to work a lot, and we need the hot support of everyone. We need your support. In 1 week, I'm talking about extractivism, mining and all that stuff, to British audience. And we need help there, because we need to put something on the new constitution that help us to develop an alternative to extractivism. You see, this is how important is Chile at the moment, because we can put in a new constitution something that will change, will make a change, and it will help everybody.
Okay. I'm gonna go, Carlos. I'm gonna go ask Russell, and then I'm gonna say a bit. And other comrades, if you're also waiting in the queue here to have a go, but I'll take Russell first, and then maybe I'll make a couple of comments myself.
This is more by way of observations, because Carlos, as you've been speaking, and I want to say thank you for a very extensive and illuminating account. But you may recall that we have had some discussions about what I want to say, and I'm going to try and link it to those discussions, and I'm also going to try and link it to the kind of raison d'etre of the Republican Socialist Alliance, which is the constitutional question. The constitutional question for any kind of social transformation is important, but linked to the constitution, it's something that I want to raise, which isn't much discuss, but in relation to Chile and Venezuela and Bolivia and Nicaragua, it's very pertinent. The constitutional arrangement is only as strong as its weakest link, and the weakest link is always the repressive state apparatus, the police and the military. And what you saw in Chile with the Allende triumph was actually a defeat and overthrow by the military, even though Allende was scrupulous in his observance of constitutional matters. Now, there's nothing to say that if you push the how can we say, the push too hard in your constitutional demands, that the military won't step in and snuff it out again. That's the first thing. Now, you mentioned Bolivia, and then you mentioned Venezuela. As you know, while we were still working together, we spent many an afternoon in shock and discussing the differences between Bolivia and Venezuela and even Nicaragua. There's one very big difference between Venezuela, Nicaragua on the one side, and Bolivia and Chile on the other side. In Venezuela, not only is the military part of the Chavista revolution, but there's also a massive people's militia, and you don't hear much about that in the press. But if imperialism dared to launch a military attack against Venezuela, they would be faced with not only the Venezuelan military, but they'd be faced with the people's militia in Venezuela, which begs the question: in Bolivia, Evo Morales ruled for 14 years, but actually did nothing in terms of changing the repressive state apparatus, which eventually, once it got bold enough, overthrew him. So, and Nicaragua also has the Nicaraguan revolutions based on the Sandinista armed struggle, which then comes back to, I'll finish off here on, comes back to the whole question of constitutional transformation in this country. We already know when Jeremy Corbyn was leading the Labour Party, the military was sort of rocking the cage and sort of threatening all sorts of things. And it's my, in my humble opinion, unless there's a constitutional arrangement which addresses the repressive state apparatus, the chances of real transformation here could also be snuffed out. And the interesting thing is, finally, is interesting to see what actually happens across the pond once civil war breaks out there. Anyway, it's not these aren't they big questions, but they're certainly worth reflecting on, thinking about.
I'm going to, okay, thanks, Russell. I'm going to take Alan Boylan, because although I said I'd take myself next, I'll take Alan first. I'll push myself a bit down the queue to next. So Alan, I'll let you go next.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It's been an interesting discussion. This, I think, actually looking now at Rick and the Republican and Socialist platform, there's big lessons to be learned here about the value of a constitution and no participating in writing that constitution. Because you could find, you could gain independence, win the war of that, and lost a shed load of rights to the army or the police or shall we call them the great and the good that tend to like to write these constitutions. So there's huge lessons. We've got to start treating this seriously, because either I want to win freedom and get away in the same hand. So there's huge lessons to be learned, like, and I'll be surprised the length of time it's taken the Chileans to try and progress to a newer, more fairer constitution. So there's real dangers there for Scotland in the future if we didn't start either writing the constitution, and actually disagree with Russell there. I think to play footsie with the military is the wrong approach. You've got to stick your nails to the coffin. So we need to come with a real radical constitution, a real change. Let them argue against it rather than try and play with the devil, because we'll lose. Thanks.
Okay, Carl, I'll make a couple of I think we're getting onto a very interesting issue, which is the Constitution and what role that plays in all of this. So the Constitution being the basic law, and it's so important. But in this country, especially in England, people don't even think in constitutional terms. They do in Scotland because of the national question in Scotland, and they probably do in Wales. But in England, we're just not interested. It's such a long time ago since we crafted the. It's not 30 years ago, 300 years ago. You know, we've long forgotten what happened 300 years ago when our constitution was set up. But we basically can't remember. We don't know, and we can't even remember what the laws were. And there's been so many changes ever since. But really, a constitution is protecting the property rights and the rights of citizens, written by that class of people that wrote it in the first place, which obviously wasn't the Chilean people. It wasn't us, you know, it was somebody else that did it, some people long dead. So they wrote it to protect property. They wrote it to do it. And then, of course, they also write it to protect the military. So you couldn't, under Allende agreed to abide by the Chilean constitution, which meant he couldn't touch the military legally. It was illegal to do that. So he couldn't interfere with it. So it protected the military until the military literally killed him and shot him down. Because abiding by the constitution is abiding by the thing that's going to be used to destroy you. It's going to keep you in place, a set of rules which will keep you in place. And to me, it's no surprise that when you think back to Franco, you could take the parallel with Franco. What Franco wanted to do when he was giving power open to a new constitution for Spain, he wanted to embed as much of his system in the new constitution as possible. He didn't really want it to be changed. So he brought back the monarchy. He groomed the monarchy to take over so that they could now call themselves a democracy, but basically the Francoist regime, the Francoist laws, rules, all the rest, institutions would be untouched, would remain in place. And that's what dictators want to do. They want to keep their constitution inviolate and untouchable because they know that is their lever on power. And as a liberal democracy, we don't think in those terms. If we would been living on a dictatorship, we go, no, we're not having this constitution. You know, the Chilean people understand that point. And it shows you that something which is student strike, student occupation can spin into a constitutional issue because the situation is pregnant with it, because the rules of the game were decided by a dictatorship which hadn't really been overthrown. And it makes me think that you don't have just one republic. You know, some people say, well, we could have a republic because we've got a constitutional monarchy, but you can have a republic like in Chile, but you can have a completely new republic and you completely write the name of the game. So we've got the example that we've talked about in relation to, I've certainly talked lots of times, Alan, about Scotland having a democratic revolution, but in a way, Chile's having a democratic revolution. It's involving the mass of people in struggle. They're getting into constitutional and legal questions. The fundamental basic laws of society are being discussed. And so the question is, what do you do in those situations? Because we should look at Chile and say, well, in Scotland or in England, that's what's coming down the track. That's how it will be. And obviously the question of constituent assembly is important, and that's been mentioned already. That's very, very important. To write a new constitution, you've got to have that. And you've also got to, I would also argue, you've got to have a provisional government of some kind and not just a continuation of the government that you had before. But that's another thing. I'll stop at that point, but I'll let other people come in. I can see that...
Steve, I can't find the thing for raising my hand.
Okay, well, don't worry. I've seen you, John. So I'll take Alan, and then John, I've spotted you now, so I'll take you after Alan. Is that all right, Carlos? We'll take some more. You want to?
I'm taking notes.
You're taking notes. Good. Yeah. Okay. Alan, then are you ready? You want to fire away? Unmic yourself. On whatever it is you want to do. Put your mic on, Alan. That's it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh. First of all, Carlos, thanks very much for that extensive contribution. I'd like to start off with with Russell, but then in a different direction. Russell raised some really interesting points about the difference between Chile on one hand, Venezuela, and Nicaragua on the other, and how in Bolivia and in Chile, the military and repressive forces are not under the pre-end constitution. We were still sacrosanct, and so you had this base from which the right could come back. I mean, he's pointing out that in the UK, people don't really. Oh, let's be more precise. In Great Britain, people notice, don't see a problem. People are becoming aware of a in Scotland. It is a wake-up call to think the British ruling class is quite prepared to resort to armed force in Northern Ireland. You know that definitively. That's why the people there are Republicans. But I want to actually take it in a different direction. Is because you emphasised that people involved in the movement do not really much need for parties. They're into the movement, and the movement is everything. Now, how does that go along with constructing a new constitution? Back to Iceland, right? Probably the least repressive state in the world, but nevertheless, they after the 2008 crash, they had a major exit. The neoliberal government collapsed. The popular movement to create a constitution. 2 or 3 years of doing that. Now, in that time, they never actually got round to really framing a constitution, but the right had its parties. And when it came to the next election, the right took over, and the constitution was, the new constitution just never got off the ground. So there's a danger that unless you have some organized presence from the left, which I think would be a party presence, putting forward its own constitutional proposals, this process just becomes an extended talking which can mobilize and come back. So what do you see as the role of left helping construct a constitution? Or in the absence of that significant, is there a danger the whole process will just collapse or be co-opted by the right?
Can I just say, Alan was almost quite slightly freezing for me. Was it for anybody else, or was it just me?
Yeah. I didn't want to interrupt, but Alan, the signal was very, very poor.
We could hear you all right, but it was sort of slightly almost freezing, and I didn't know if it was my problem, Bill, or everybody else was seeing the same thing that I could see. Alan was still talking to us, but he was sort of half freezing a bit of the time. But it didn't prevent us hearing what you were saying, Alan. But it just was a bit funny.
Just quite make out the question that Alan asked at the end. Was it about the role of political parties in the process?
Alan, you want to come back?
On a technical point, you should try check what your broadband speed is, because most people are ripped off by the broadband companies. They know that you don't know how to test your speed, but it's quite easy. You're probably not getting what you should be getting, and you should make a complaint.
Conor, you were saying something.
Yeah, Conor was asking Alan. What your last question was about parties. Could you repeat that, Alan, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Parties. What do you see as the role of parties in framing a new constitution, putting forward suggestions? The right will no doubt be doing that. They've got this, so they will be framing that in organizations to do that. But a sort of popular movement on the street cannot construct a new constitution. It can only end up as a ginger group for somebody. So where do you see on the left the people who will frame a left constitution?
I just, Carlos, to add to that, if it's the case that the right understand the constitutional question, they're busily writing it, whereas the left is not that bothered about it because they think we need other stuff. They leave it up to them. So in the end of the day, we end up with what they're doing, which is what Alan's essentially saying. But anyway, sorry. Carlos, back to Carlos, I think, and then I'm going to.
Yeah,
Carlos,
okay.
I
will say a few things.
Yeah, then I'm going to. Let's also just say there's John Tuman also wants to come in. I did recognise him, but let's take you, Carlos, and then I'll bring John.
Yes, John. We can hear John first.
Do you want to hear John? Do you want to come on, John?
Okay. Yeah, I think my question is quite similar to Alan's, really. In the I think the history of the 21st century as opposed to the 20th century all over the world, certainly in the Western world, has been one of leaderless movements on the left. From everything that I can remember over the last 20 years has been a leaderless movement. And I think we saw this classically in Greece and also in Spain, where you had a kind of left populism emerging in Spain. But it didn't really take form in actually contesting the issues of constitution, issues of political organization, and so on. And I thought that Carlos posed this question himself very near the end. And Carlos, you seem to say there's a need to unite a divided left, and that most of the leaders were liquidated or had fled. You mentioned the mayor of part of Santiago, San Juan, from the Communist Party, but the question is similar to Alan's, really. Well, mine is the process of forming a new constitution one which can involve a hastily put together left alliance, or is it something that's already stitched up by the right wing?
I'm just going to say, I'm going to put it up to Carlos. Hello?
Can I go on that?
Yes, Carlos, go on. I'm just going to say to John, we can only see your forehead there, John. I could anyway. So you've got to slightly tilt your camera angle. We only see your eyebrows and your forehead. So we can hear you fine. So it all makes sense, but we can only see your eyebrows. Anyway, carry on, Carlos.
I think it is fascinating the way we can think of things that transcend countries, first thing. And this is amazing in a way. I mean, I'm really happy with that. Militaries. Well, in normal kind of our lesson of Marxism, we know that militaries are part of the state, one particular part of the state. So they're depending of the status quo of what state is, basically. So in the Chilean case, and probably many other cases, wasn't understood properly during the Allende government. We know a little bit more ahead of that. We know a little bit more of that. plus the fact that militaries are really have a really bad press because of their kind of repression, robberies, corruption, etc. So they are not in a very good position in Chile at the moment. And I wanted to do a little bit of history. Give me a couple of minutes on that.
Carlos, just before you start, just a second. Can I ask a question? We've got 5 minutes to go, and I'm prepared.
Hold
on a second. I'm wondering whether we should reboot again a third time. Do people want to carry on talking, and we could easily reboot.
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah,
anyway.
so I suggest we carry on, and then if it goes down, what I'm saying to you, I will set it up again, and we can carry on talking more. Okay?
Yeah, but
the results of
it is important for what you are doing in terms of Republicans.
Yeah.
Chile started being, as you know, a colony from Spain, and it got independence by default because of Napoleon going into Spain and whatever, and the colonies losing a little bit from the center, and Chile got independent from that, 1810. And in 1830, 1835, still Chile was governed as a republic by the power of assemblies, local assemblies, which send a delegate to the center, and until 1835, 1840s, until a dictator changed the rules for something somebody said, for the elite, for the people who have the power. They done it. In 1925, again, there was a change between the type of capitalism that was being developed in Chile, the local with the international capitalism, and the rules, the constitution was changed again in the same tune by 40 people. No elected people. 40. In the 70s, in the 80s actually, Pinochet changed the constitution again and created the constitution that was kind of apt to allow neoliberalism within that. Because without changing the constitution, you couldn't put neoliberalism there. Yeah. Now we're changing things again. And we think that the issue of police or militaries, it will be not the first problem. The first problem will be the way you decide your country is going to be governed by. So we stop being a country that are going to be giving everything to the multinationals or whatever. If we do that, we kind of recover some of our natural resources, starting with the water, starting with the copper, we'll be going there. If we change those are fundamentals, we will change the state as well. So that's I think, how many minutes we got?
We got 2 minutes to go, so we'll just talk on a little bit. We'll call it down, and I'll open it up.
Yeah, okay. Talking about republicanism, I think the Chilean case is something that everybody needs to study. We got everything in the book in terms of Republican kind of processes, and within. So it's a good case to study, and usually I've been learning this now on the last year. I haven't been kind of really aware of this until now, and that's one of the things that kind of help me to be interested on talking to you, for instance, because it is something that is kind of new in my vocabulary in a way. All right. a couple of things else. We talk about the left and the alliances after the debate.
Yes.
Yeah. Can
Yeah,
we talk about
it says we've got less than a minute to go, so I think it'll be happening in a second now. So I'm going to try and now turn the whole thing off.
Yeah.
And we'll boot it up again. I'll go end. Here we're ending the meeting, comrades, and we'll be back again in a couple of minutes, I suppose.